Hi there, I'm Linda Banfalvey. I'm back in the studio here with this painting that I've mounted on cradled wood panel. As you can see, I'll just show you what it looks like underneath. It's a birch panel that's been cradled with wood, and I did a little video tutorial on how I mounted this painting, so you can have a look at that. It will be most likely on my website so that you can check that out. I painted the edges with black gesso, and the surface has been gesso with several coats of white gesso, because that's how I prepare my boards when I'm painting directly on the boards. But often I love to paint on watercolor paper, so I use a good quality cotton rag paper, and I've painted with acrylics onto this board, and this is the finished painting. So the buyer chose, instead of framing it under glass where you have a traditional presentation of paper artwork, that I would mount it to board like I have, and then I'm going to do a final picture varnish to seal all the surface and along to the edge as well. So what I do for that is I use Liquitex acrylic professional. I like to use a satin varnish, so it comes in all sorts of different finishes. You can get a matte finish or a gloss finish, and satin is kind of an in-between, and I really like that finish, so that's what I'm going to use on top of this painting that's been mounted to cradled wood panel. So what I normally do is I take my bowl, my bottle of Liquitex varnish, and I put it on my table, and I give it a roll. I make sure that the lid is on tight, and in order to mix it before I start using it, I just give it a little roll back and forth, and it stirs the varnish without foaming it up, because sometimes people want to shake it, and you can froth up your mediums or your varnish that way. So I just give it a nice roll, make sure it's well mixed, and then what I do, you can pour it directly onto your painting if you desire to do that, but I like to put it in a styrofoam plate. I just pour the amount that I think I need, and I apply it to my brush and then apply it to the painting. That way I don't have an excess of medium, or of the varnish on my painting. Especially if you're the first time you do this, you may not know exactly how much you need. So this is just a good way to get to know how much you need. And then once you're an old pro at it, then you can choose whether you do it this way or apply it directly. So I have a brush here that's just like a soft nylon brush. And this one, actually, I have never used this one before. It's brand new, Mod Podge is what it says on it. But I had previous brushes similar to this that was like that white Taklon. It's very, very similar feeling. It's just a little narrower, and I've had them for so many years that they started getting hard. So I have a new one here today to try. So I moistened it a little bit with some water, and then I've made sure that all the water is out. I give it a shake to make sure that into the furrow of the brush it's not all flooded with water, because you don't want to dilute your varnish. But it just helps to keep the lifespan of the brush if you make sure that it's a little bit moist, so that the acrylic doesn't dry in there and then it wrecks your brush. Because acrylic tends to dry fast, and if you're in a dry environment, it'll dry even faster. So, okay, so I'm going to just go ahead and put the varnish directly on my brush. Get it good. It's gonna sit there. Oops. There's just a little fiber that flicked off of something. All right, so this painting is good and dry. I mounted it actually 2 days ago, so it's totally firm onto the board, and all the edges are very firmly fastened. So it turned out really nicely. And I've been doing this for years, so it works every time. So have a look at my other tutorial if you've never done this before. So now this is a nice wide brush, so I can get quite a bit on at one time. And I like to, this is watercolor paper. Some of the surfaces, it all has acrylic on it, but some of it has more porous areas. So I'm going to want to make sure that the varnish sinks into there and just seals it really well. So I'm just going off my edges, doing gentle crisscross strokes. It's really bringing out the color nicely. I'm not sure how that shows on the camera. And once you move on, you want to make sure, I'm just going to go over this here. Make sure that's well done onto the paper. But once it starts to set up, you don't want to go over top of that again with your brush. I mean, you have enough working time, but I'm just saying that don't start, once you get down to the bottom, don't start going back up to the top again. Acrylic does dry fairly quickly, and I'm just looking from an angle to make sure that I'm getting all the areas evenly and that I don't have any stripes or strokes that are bugging me. I'm just going to tip it just to see. Yeah, it looks good from here. I'm going to carry on. This brush is lovely. I like it. I'm just going to, you can do a large area. So I bought this because a lot of times I'm varnishing acrylic on canvas, and it's nice to have a wide brush so that you can varnish a large surface quickly. So I'm just going to work it right down. And I put enough varnish on my plate because I'm actually varnishing 2 paintings today. So I want to make sure that I had enough without having to stop my process and get more. Little dry spot here. Make sure it's worked in nicely. And then I go around and I'm paying attention to the surface of my painting. Just a little touch more right here. More than the edges. There might be some dripping off the edges a little, but I will take care of that in a minute. So I'm just making sure that this has a good coat here because I could see that it was sinking in when I looked at it from the side. You don't want so much medium on here that it pools or you have a cloudy coverage. You want it to be nice and thin, but you want it to be well covered. Okay, so I think that's it for the surface. One little spot here that's a little bit there. Good. Okay. Now I can see when I'm looking at this where I went here, it's already setting in and starting to dry a little bit. So the house has been air conditioned for a few days. So I'm not going to go back and touch that part of the painting. I'm just having a look to make sure I've got all the areas. And that looks good. So the surface is varnished. So now I'm going to just pick up a little bit on here. Move this over so I have lots of room. And I'm going to bring it over. I don't know if you're going to be able to see this. I'll do it so you could see it. And I'm just going to finish the edges. I think you could see that. And the edges were painted with the black gesso, so it's very matte. And what I like is to have that satin finish all the way over. So it helps to protect the painting from being scratched or chipped just by giving it that final varnish coat. And you want to make sure the edges of the paper along here is well coated with the acrylic as well. And it looks pretty darn nice. There we go. One edge done. And I'm not touching the surface, I'm just doing the edge. So I'm just going to take a little more there and pick it up from underneath. And I'll just, it's easier when you're not trying to film it. But I want you to kind of see what I'm doing here. So it's just a nice thin coat of the varnish. I have to say I do like this brush because you can do a lot. You can do it nice and quickly. There we go. Okay. Good. And just this one little spot here that went over onto the top. This long edge. Now, often when I'm by myself and not trying to do it on the camera, I'll just overlap it over my table here and do it along this edge, but you wouldn't be able to see it, so that's why I'm doing this. So you don't have to hold it up like I am. I just want you to be able to see exactly what I'm doing. Pardon my arms. There we go. And so they're, mounting the painting on board, it looks just like I painted it directly on the board. And it's totally sealed and varnished, so you don't have to have glass in between the painting and the viewer. And there you go, that's nice. And a little bit here, I'm just going to take that little ridge. There we go, that looks good. That'll all dry. I just have one more edge to do and we're done. So that's not rocket science. Pretty easy to do. I have never, right from the beginning, I have never had a problem with this technique in terms of anything lifting or any problems. Like, it's just like a painting as if you had painted right on the board. And I love painting on paper, so you can get all sorts of nice effects by doing that. So I'm thrilled that this works so nicely. I'm just taking that little edge so that I don't have a line that's thicker here, and that'll just fade out and you won't see it. So that's just doing another quick look. It's partially dry already. You can still see some wet spots. And I'm just going to leave it here to dry. And that's how I varnish a painting. Now, you can go ahead and do another coat if you feel it needs to. If you look at it and you see that it's stripy or it's doing something that you don't like, it's sunk in unevenly, then wait till it's completely dry and then you can do another varnish over top. But I usually just do the one, and I find it does the trick quite nicely. I don't see any problems. It's nice and sealed. So that would be a personal choice, and sometimes you might need to do that though, just to let you know. So all right, so that's it. I will let this dry and then it's ready to go to its new home. Thank you very much for joining me in my studio again. I'm going to go ahead and do my second one, but I don't think that you need to watch. It's going to be exactly the same. All right, thank you. See you next time.